Please, Mr. Swinney.
President Officer, this has been a very wide-ranging and constructive debate this afternoon, but within this wide-ranging debate there was one very specific contribution on a particular issue which Dr Murray raised, and as usual the detailed and thoughtful way that Dr Murray raises these points about the application of the Sewell Convention and its operation, in particular its application to the Human Rights Act. And I want to just take a couple of moments to address some of what Dr Murray raised, because I suspect a great deal more of what she raised about the implications around the stance of the current United Kingdom Government on human rights provision will require some very detailed legal analysis which Parliament will have to consider. But the points that Dr Murray raised about just how confident we could be in the robustness of the Sewell Convention is directly applicable to what we might face on the Human Rights Act. Because there will undoubtedly, for the UK government, the current UK government, to repeal the Human Rights Act and to replace it with a British Bill of Rights will require the agreement of this Parliament in a legislative consent motion consistent with the Sewell Convention. But some of what Dr Murray then went on to raise about the possibility of this Parliament legislating in the sphere of human rights will be very complicated for us to consider, given the fact that the Human Rights Act is named in Schedule 4 and therefore an area which this Parliament is prohibited from amending. So I think the issues that Dr Murray raised on a point of great detail illustrate the significance that can be attached to some of the provisions within the Smith provisions, and we certainly have to make sure that nothing happens that in any way diminishes the effective control that this Parliament has to protect the legitimate interests of the devolved settlement in relation to some of these questions. Now, I think the debate has benefited enormously from taking place in what I might call the cool aftermath of the general election, where I notice a significant reduction in the tone and tension within the parliamentary chamber. So much so that Iain Gray managed to find himself able to say that he agreed with the Deputy First Minister, which is a joyous... Us former commissioners must stick together, Mr Gray, in all of these respects. But I think, I don't say this to in any way cast aspersions, but I think when the United Kingdom Government set out their clauses in January, some of the reaction within Parliament to the points put forward by the Scottish Government was almost to suggest that we were trying to pick a fight where no fight was to be picked. And here we find ourselves now today in Parliament with Mr Gray accepting that the spirit and the substance of the Smith Commission has not been implemented in the clauses. And I welcome that. And I welcome that where it's come from across the political spectrum, because it really makes an utterly compelling proposition to the United Kingdom Government that if they are to live up to their rhetoric, they have to accept that what was published in January is just not sufficient to satisfy the commitment to translate Smith in spirit and in substance into legislation. And some of that is evidenced by the contributions that a number of members have made. Rob Gibson's contribution in the terms around the Crown Estate, the draft legislation says that there may be provision rather than there shall be. And we all know what may means. That means might, perhaps. And we know what shall means. It will, it must, it will happen. Linda Fabiani talked about why was it necessary to put into the draft clauses the words about the permanency of this Parliament, that the Parliament would be recognised as Parliament, as permanent. Why don't we just say Parliament's permanent? And that really entrenches the position as well as it can be entrenched within the unwritten constitution of the United Kingdom. So I do think the Scottish Parliament, really with some force, has expressed its view that what was published on the 22nd of January, yes, on time, it was on time, I can't quibble about the timescale, it was even early, but like most of the capital projects of the Scottish Government, I might add. But, oh well, there we are. I should have prevented myself from encouraging Jackie Baillie to get to her feet.
Jackie Baillie. I wonder whether he doesn't regret that last remark, given that there are discussions with ONS and Eurostat about the validity of some capital projects, whether they're on or off budget. And indeed, in my own local area, Our Lady in St Patrick's High School has been delayed as a result.
Well, there's Jackie Baillie, always one to break a consensus when she can find one to break. So the point that we've got to in this debate is to recognise that the provisions of the clauses must be substantially improved to fulfil the commitments in Smith. And I want to make absolutely crystal clear the position of the Scottish Government, that delivery of the Smith Commission proposals is not and should not be seen as any response to the outcome of the general election. It should be seen as the fulfilment of the commitment made post-referendum, and it is the absolute minimum that must be delivered by the United Kingdom Government, because to do anything else would be a breach of faith to the people of this country, given the fact that from our different points of view we came together in the Smith Commission and argued for the propositions that we put forward. So the Scottish Government believes that the delivery of the spirit and the substance of the Smith Commission report is entirely related to the post-referendum outcome and nothing to do with the post-election outcome. Now, what's been interesting, the other interesting element of the debate has been the recognition that there is still space for further constitutional development. I've obviously set out the aspirations of the Government to move into further for further powers to be devolved to the Parliament within the structure of the United Kingdom. Iain Gray made the argument for housing benefit, which he made in the Smith Commission and has repeated it today. Mr Rowley very clearly said that there were further responsibilities that should be transferred to this Parliament within the devolved settlement. So there is clearly a debate to be had about how we expand and extend the powers of the Scottish Parliament. And Alison Johnstone was absolutely correct to say, and Annabel Goldie has made this point in question time to me just in the course of the last week, that it is essential that we have dialogue with members of the public in Scotland about how we most effectively do that to ensure, and Christine Graham made this point about the 18,000 members of the public that had submitted to the Smith Commission, but whose voices I don't think any of us who participated in the Smith Commission could feel that we did justice to the input because of the timescale that was involved. So we are at a moment, particularly after the general election, and anybody looking at the general election outcome has to say and conclude that the people of Scotland were indicating that they had a desire for there to be greater responsibility vested in this Parliament. And that is an issue to which we must turn our minds, and we will discuss that with the Secretary of State, but I give my commitment to wider public participation in that respect. The final point I want to make is about intergovernmental arrangements, because a lot has been talked about how governments need to work together to arrive at conclusions. And I reaffirm the Scottish Government's desire to work constructively with the United Kingdom Government in any way that we can on our joint agendas. There will be issues upon which we disagree. The Human Rights Act is one of them, where we fundamentally disagree with the United Kingdom Government, and will say so. And there are other issues on which we are in disagreement. But I think I come back to my point about my reflection on the post-election tone of this debate. I hope members will understand that the Scottish Government sometimes has to dig its heels in to protect the interests of this Parliament and this country. If I hadn't dug my heels in about the block grant adjustment, about land and buildings transaction tax, this Parliament would have ended up with a worse deal because of what was proposed by Her Majesty's Treasury. And that will be crucial in the fiscal framework. It will be crucial in the working arrangements. And we cannot proceed on the basis that the United Kingdom Government has the ability to impose upon the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament arrangements that suit them, but do not suit Scotland and do not suit the devolved interests of the Scottish Parliament. And that will be the position that the Scottish Government takes in taking forward the necessity of intergovernmental cooperation to implement these provisions.
Many thanks.